3 years ago, the coalition government introduced guidelines for council-run newspapers and magazines. Then it accused some authorities of using publications to put out political propaganda. And now it's still accusing some councils of doing that as well. Andrew Cryan reports.
Local authorities are publishing magazines full of propaganda, not far off Soviet Russia's notorious Pravda. At least that's according to the government. In 2011, they tried introducing a voluntary code of practice, but ministers say it's been ignored by some authorities. 2 weeks ago, they wrote to 6 of them, threatening them ultimately with legal action. 5 of those 6 are in London.
Either there's unfair competition using taxpayers' money, for example, a weekly newspaper that takes on and can make it very difficult for the freedom of independent press, or if there's political propaganda. Taxpayers' money should not be used for political propaganda.
We asked the 5 councils involved for an interview, but they all declined. They did point out that the magazines were popular with many residents, and in some cases made the local authority money from advertising. Some disputed whether they did breach government guidelines at all. But controversy also surrounds some councils the government's not taking action against. In Hammersmith and Fulham, the council's fortnightly H&F News had been criticised by a local commercial newspaper and others. The council replaced it with this, the quarterly Your magazine. But according to the local Labour Party, the council's publicity takes a pro-Conservative stance on sensitive election issues. Here, the magazine says that the local Charing Cross Hospital's future has been secured. But Labour were out on the streets this week campaigning to defend the hospital against what it calls its effective closure. Pretty much the opposite message.
We're asking people to stand with us to save Charing Cross Hospital. In actual fact, it's just going to be 13% of it would be left. And yet, the day after it was announced that they were going to do that, a glossy magazine at £20,000 of public money went to every household in the borough, splashed with the headline, Charing Cross Hospital saved. Now, that's plainly not true.
Labour also claimed that the council magazine has been used as an excuse to telephone residents in their homes and push a one-sided view of another council policy, council tax, with no mention of what Labour says is the other half of the story, the introduction of over 600 new stealth taxes. Residents were called at home and asked,
"Did you receive a copy of Your magazine on Friday? Did you find the Your magazine informative? Do you agree with the council's proposal to cut council tax again by 3% next year?"
Someone's sitting at home, they're cooking for the tea, they're busy, the phone rings, you've got a council official on the line asking you about one side of a Conservative policy. And the other side is £64 million worth of stealth taxes. Never mentioned at all. They were specifically asking questions designed to give a false impression of the Conservative administration's record and to get it into people's consciousness.
So what exactly was going on here? Sunday Politics asked a leading polling company.
There's been circumstances in America largely where people have done things called push polls, where really they're pretending to do a poll, but their ultimate aim has actually been to push out often negative propaganda about their opponents. This isn't quite the same as that. But is the main aim of this to put out a message or to get results? It's almost impossible to say.
But what is clear is that despite government guidelines coming in 3 years ago, the controversy surrounding local government publicity remains.
Well, I'm joined now by the Deputy Leader, Conservative Deputy Leader of Hammersmith and Fulham Council, Greg Smith, here to respond to some of the things we heard there. Welcome to you. Thank you. First off, let's take that example, for instance, about a hospital. You say saved, or this says saved, when we know that it's losing most of its floor space and a lot of the services are going. Are you using a taxpayer-funded publication for misleading information?
Well, first of all, we've halved communication spending since 2006 in Hammersmith and Fulham. With that particular example, we think it's very important to let our residents know what we're doing on their behalf. Now, councils don't run the NHS. We've got no control over hospitals. But there was a proposal put down by NHS London to essentially close Charing Cross Hospital. Instead of waving placards, we got in front of the Secretary of State, we got in front of the officials at the NHS, and we got them to a position where there will still be a hospital on that site, in fact £100 million rebuild of the site. There will still be emergency functions there, there will still be specialist cancer services and other services. There will still be a hospital serving our residents on that site.
And what about the second main claim there in the film, that you're getting council people to ring people up afterwards and asking them that third question, do you or don't you approve of or like our 3% cut in council tax?
Well, I looked into that, and in reality it wasn't something the council did. The people who distribute the quarterly magazine we produce do a poll to check that their guys haven't been chucking them in the bin and that people have actually received their magazine. They phoned up 100 people out of a population of 183,500 and asked them if they'd had their magazine. They put that additional question in. I don't even know what the result of that poll was.
Why on earth did they want to know? What's that got to do with them about how much you've reduced council tax or not?
They said, do you want to put an extra question in? We thought,
so you did.
Why not?
So you agreed to it then?
We haven't seen the results. I don't know what the results are.
But you were using that opportunity to, it's described as push polling or whatever, and you use it as an opportunity to remind those people that you'd cut council tax recently.
100 people were phoned. It was not a taxpayer-funded exercise. It was something that the commercial distributor did essentially as standard practice wherever they deliver.
Do you think it is right, or do you do it as well? Do you accept that you use council publications, your new quarterly magazine, to put the best possible gloss on what the Conservative-run Hammersmith Council does?
Every organisation wants to tell the people it serves, whether it's a council serving residents or a business serving their customers, what they are doing. And we fully comply with the new code that the government has brought in. But this sort of communication is nothing new. The Labour Party, when they ran Hammersmith and Fulham, produced a £500,000 a year glossy magazine called HFM. Your magazine, which we now produce, actually doesn't cost the taxpayers a penny because the advertising that goes in it more than funds.
I'm having a look at that, and just to tell the viewers, that is February 2006, which would have been a couple of months before the local elections then. Kate Hoey, does everyone do it?
Well, I think every council wants to get information out, and of course if it's run by a particular political party, good things then they feel will be, go to their party. Lambeth, I think, did used to do some pretty dreadful propaganda. Now I'm quite happy and relaxed with them. We have a monthly magazine which is really about information. It's not party political. And I actually, there are an awful lot of people in my constituency who aren't on email, who don't get communications in a way that perhaps some of us would. And a magazine that is giving information but is also telling people about what's happening can be useful. So I think all political parties need to be careful about this, but ultimately, the public aren't stupid. Yeah. And they know when they're being sort of told something.
And if that's the case, why on earth does, Brandon Lewis there or the government feel that it wants to interfere or go to 6 councils and say, we don't like the way you've said that, or this document you're producing?
Well, as I understand it, one of the councils, Greenwich, for instance, produces a weekly newspaper. Now, it may be a very busy council, but I'd be very surprised if, on a weekly basis, there is enough to justify producing a newspaper. When, of course, and they're in direct competition with the local newspaper.
I thought there's a local who's government.
I think the trouble is, that there is a risk that the content of that, because there isn't enough on a weekly basis to provide content that is factual, the content is likely to be more political spin than it is actually useful information for the residents.
You see, my borough used to put out lots of different leaflets about different things, and when you add up all the cost of those, if you do one properly produced monthly one, it actually can save money. And so, I'm very relaxed about it, but it does have to be carefully looked at. And I can understand why at certain times, coming up to elections,
I suspect that in fact, over the next few years, most councils will move towards social media as a means of delivering their information or by email. I think in the next 10 years, I think
and a final word on that. Will you keep this going if you're re-elected?
We've stripped all the cost out. Our publications are actually largely funded by advertising, and at the same time, we've managed to cut council tax by 20% over 8 years.
Okay, well, thanks for coming in, Greg.
And put up a few extra.
Well, absolutely, but that's a discussion for another time. Here's the rest of the